Welcome to the James Gomez Podcast for my take on issues that affect you and me. And here we go. So welcome. I'm James Gomez. I have an interest in how the internet affects governance and political participation, and by extension, how it affects the media. And for all of us who have been reading news about the media, not just in Singapore, but around the region globally, we know the move towards technology and the use of technology platforms have also led to challenges of sustainability of media, especially mainstream media. So to set the context of the chat and discussion today, different, colleagues, individuals, commentators have come to it in different ways. I would like to come to it in the context of the need for independent institutions broadly, which means not just the media. The media is one, at least that's how it's been articulated, as well as the need for other types of independent institutions that offer a set of checks and balances, but also builds confidence and trust in the community. So with that, I would like to just remind us, and I'm hoping there would be conversations out there that when we look at the media, sometimes in Singapore, and here I'm speaking primarily of the mainstream media. It has always been about setting the agenda and shaping the narratives. So it's only, relevant that I mention over the years, several decades, how opposition politicians have been framed in the mainstream media. The volume of coverage, both for individuals, political parties, as well as during elections. More recently, how copious amounts of coverage was poured onto the situation in Oxley Rise and in relation to Lee Hsien Young's legal efforts over the will. Now, a quick reminder, Reporters Without Borders ranked Singapore 160 in 2021, and the ranking has fluctuated between 149 out of 180 to 160 out of 180 since 2013, with a general, slide towards declining freedom of the press. Of course, back home, those in government have said that the rankings are absurd and divorced of reality. That is, strange that Singapore's media is, portrayed in such a manner, or that, the Singapore state is a repressive one and controls the thoughts of people and very unfairly targets the press. So this is how those indexes on press freedoms are responded to, but they're out there. Here I want to draw a comparison between the idea of freedom of expression. Now, freedom of expression broadly has three indicators: academic freedom, press freedom, as well as internet freedoms. And often there is a correlation between all these freedoms because these are known as fundamental freedoms and they are a cluster of rights. And if one of the freedoms is affected, it affects the ranking across the three. So that's something to keep in mind when we talk about the relevance of press freedoms. I think it's also good to see within the scale of index where does Singapore stand in terms of academic freedoms as well as internet freedoms. So I'll just park there. But of course, the approach taken has not only been on the notion of freedoms, that has also been the notion of trust. So when we talk about notion of trust, you can refer to takes a sample size of over 1,000 persons, and there Singapore scores strongly, well above the global rankings. The government as an institution is reported as being most trusted by the Singapore respondents, 76% compared to a global average of 70%. And in terms of media, of course, media ranks lower in terms of trust compared to the government at 62%, but still has seen, over the years, a slight increase in trust. So just to put it in numbers, the global average is 56% trusted traditional media sources, whereas in Singapore that was placed at 64. Yeah. So that's kind of trust. And finally, 50% of Singaporean respondents believe that most news organizations are more concerned with supporting an ideology or political position than informing the public, and 47% believe media is not doing well at all at being objective. So, having said that, and I think it's also important to keep in mind the qualitative approach here. The question is, in this, level of trust, both, especially in the media, what is the trust in the reportage of Singapore politics, especially those that concerns, alternative voices, not just in terms of political parties, but also civil society, academics, and the whole genre of that. So is that trust, out there in terms of the reportage of the mainstream media on that component of the Singapore landscape? Now, the next is ownership. Now, this is, again, public information. It's widely known that there is a two-step or two-tier method of control. SPH essentially is privately owned, inverted commas, by multiple shareholders, both state and non-state linked institution. And so, in terms of management shares, the Great Eastern Life owns 22%, OCBC owns 16%, NTUC Income owns 16%, Singapore Telecommunication owns 13%. Brought in all, companies that are closely aligned with the state and the elites. So here there's another idea to bring in mind in Singapore. Singapore has what is called a singular elite. That means there is no competition among the elites. They all come from the same crop, right? And they are, dispersed over these institutions, both private and public. This is very different if you cross the border to Malaysia, where there is a system of competing elites, because the country, the divisions, the resources is more varied. Similarly in Indonesia, similarly in the Philippines, similarly in Thailand. So you have a system of competing elites. So therefore, you have a natural diversity and contestation over there. Next, it's the financial health of the Straits Times or Singapore Press Holdings. Just looking at some figures from 2007 to right now. In 2007, the full, year net profit has been 506 million, and last year's was minus 83 million. So if you ever manage to pull the figures up, you will see there has been a steady decline. There are some, anomalies in numbers. There's the odd year where the figures show it's going up in 2010, and then once again 2013, that those slight bumps have to be investigated or explained, but generally sliding. You see that it slid from 506 million 2007, and then around high 300s in 2011, just 4 years later. And then if you look at 4 years later, it's 320 million, And then if you look at 4 years later, it's 213 million, and then it's minus. From 19 to 20, it fell, nearly 97 million. That's quite a large gap. Now, in terms of, that's the overall business. But if you look at just in terms of media, just looking at the media business, 2019 was 54.7 million. In 2020, it's minus 11.4 million. So you can see the profits went down incrementally over the last 10 or 12 years. But it's last year, 2020, that they've gone in the red, both as an overall business, in terms of full year net profit, and also negative in terms of full year media profit. Now, again, these are public figures that we pulled out for the discussion, but are available out there for your own review. Now, we had just a few days ago the SPH restructuring to move from a not-for-profit structure, and also to separate it for the Singapore Press Holdings as a whole. So what it means is the property business of the SPH, which is profitable, strong assets, and all of that, that will go in one direction, and then you have the media business that has been, so contributing to the loss and increase in operating costs will then be, transformed into not-for-profit company or organization. So in that regard, what we hear is that it's seeking government funds. And obviously this has been thought through some years in the making, and as with all, control media and organized media output, then the minute the announcement is made, then you have a series of supporting stuff coming out in place of them. Now, we all have, in the last day, been bombarded by the Umbrage Incident. I think the value of that incident is really put the spotlight on this and created conversation. So the issue itself, for me, is just a manifestation of the culture and the reaction to critical questioning and the rise for accountability. Something I think, if you watch the Singapore political scene, is consistently part of the landscape, and also part of the elite political culture. So for me, that is, been discussed quite thoroughly, so I don't want to, take up your valuable time in repeating that. But it's because of the public backlash, it required political, intervention in terms of rhetoric, in saying that the question the reporter asked was a fair one. So what's the debate, right? So both the announcement of the restructuring, that those who've been watching the media would know the profit has been coming down, and something needs to be done, or what happens to something like this. And two, the Umbrage Incident just sparked the discussion. So where's the debate? So what we hear is two things. We hear quality journalism, and then we hear editorial independence. Ordinarily, quality journalism would mean also independence, editorial independence. But here in the discussion, it seems that somehow, editorial independence is not, clearly discussed, but certainly quality journalism. So that's kind of the debate, and we want. So I am trying to sort of, say that both these concepts are not kind of talking to each other, because independence or editorial independence would require the government not to be involved, especially in terms of providing funds, especially if it's in terms of providing funds to essentially a monopoly of the media, right? So I think no one debates about the need for quality journalism, but the debate actually centers around editorial independence. So then, a quick look. Often the Guardian, throughout the world, not just in this case, is put up as one example where you can receive public funding. And if you read a Guardian article, towards the end of the article, they will ask you, did you like this piece? Help us by making a donation. So this has been done, but how do you determine independence, right? So ideas of a trust has been put forward, and here we have to ask, is that the structure we want? Is that the structure that will provide editorial independence? So I think that's where the debate needs to go, and also whether ultimately it's about power, right? Who is in parliament is going to decide the way it's going. You can debate, until kingdom come, but if you don't have the numbers when it comes to the vote, and you will, listen to the debate, you will see the voluminous reportage that would emerge. And then what is the voting ultimately, right? And you can already anticipate the argumentation that will be, articulated in support of the vote that realizes. In the meantime, in the next few days, in the run-up, what will happen is, when there are discussions about this issue, especially the positions of editorial independence, you will hear counter arguments about quality, about drawing parallels to the other types of formulations that are pursued by the global example, the Guardian, and to a lesser extent, Tampa Bay Times, owned by the Poitier Institute. So you will hear, and then it's also a question of values. You will see who is raising the argument, how are they socialized, what is their political value, and what is it they are trying to push. So those are things that you can look out for. Some fun facts. The SPH CEO's salary is 1.35 million. Is that what we want to pay with public money? That's a question. The Poitier Institute, right? The CEO gets paid about 488,000. I assume that's US dollars, so bump it up to 600,000. So how much do you want to pay from public purses, right? SPH. What will be the salary of the media, the head? So those are things I think we need to sort of unpack further. I'm going to slowly wrap up my comments so that we have a bit of time to chat. So obviously I have a view, and you're not here just to hear me speak about what's out there in the news. I believe with what has happened, it once again brings to the focus the broad push for independent institutions, checks and balances, and what is the role of the media, the public media, right? And you will hear arguments for and against, of course, and whether media should even play this role of an independent checks and balances. So that's something, be quite clear. For me, I believe any institution, commission, trust, or board that acts as a gatekeeper, right, between the money and the editorial team needs to be diverse. If it's full of cronies and cronies relative, you'll have a problem. Right? It has to be diverse. It needs to include journalists, academics, other representatives. Yeah, I would say also civil society. So that's the proof in the pudding. Next, I think public funds for media should be broader. I think we need to know what we want. We want independent media. We also want a plural landscape, because all media only can cover so much. So if we have a range of media, then they can also develop niche reporting on different issues, whether it's climate issues, social issues, political issues, so on and so forth. They need resources and they need to be supported for a vibrant society, including smaller ones. So for me, I think I'd rather see a public media fund that can also include, private donations, with a diverse board and equitable board that also provides funding for media projects, for independent media. So in that sense, the broad push for independence, diverse board composition, as well as supporting a plural and media landscape would be served, including not just the big one, small. And if one thing that validates it, even if I go back to the trust barometer, is that Singaporeans tend to trust multiple sources of information. So it's good to use this opportunity to provide for that and to ensure that happens. And finally, if we are paying salaries through public money, I think salaries need to be prudent and should not be seen as excessive, and fair work, fair wage, and that goes also paying independent media decently, so that they can also enjoy normal living. So I'll stop here and take that as my initial intervention, and I'm happy to chat. So anyone wants to say anything, just put your hand up or let me know.